Hello everyone, my name is Jill Wallace and my presentation today is a research proposal involving prison culture and reentry outcomes. Right now there are more than 1.2 million people incarcerated in the United States, and we know that eventually 95% of them will be released to return to their families, homes, and communities. Research has shown that the recidivism rate in the United States within 5 years of release from incarceration is over 75%. Examining why returning citizens often return to custody within 5 years can help us develop methods to improve reentry outcomes and lower the rate of recidivism. Prison culture, particularly the relationship between inmates and staff, and inmates and peers, can impact reentry preparation while in custody and how the returning citizen adapts to life outside correctional facilities. Prisons are generally punitive environments that expose inmates to negative influences and antisocial behavior. Cook and Haynes, 2021, studied how imprisonment impacts recidivism rates and reentry outcomes. The coercive culture that is often found in correctional facilities is a result of both staff and peer relationships. The current research will examine the impact that correctional facility relationships with staff and peers have on reentry outcomes for returning citizens. There are two types of interpersonal relationships that exist within correctional facilities. Those are staff-inmate relationships and inmate-peer relationships. Our hypothesis is that if staff and peer relationships in correctional facilities are positive, reentry outcomes will be better because of an increase in healthy interpersonal relationships which build confidence and improve the outlook that inmates have for their future. Success will be defined by the dependent variable, which will be recidivism. For instance, the highest rate of success would be identified as no return to incarceration or rearrest. Each reentrant will provide information regarding the independent variables and dependent variables via interviews and surveys. Incarcerated individuals abandon the values of their families, communities, and workplaces, and they adopt the culture of the prison or jail where they are incarcerated. Wooldridge, 2020, describes how inmates adapt to prison culture and how and why those cultures exist. The culture of a correctional facility is an amalgamation of the inmates' backgrounds, values, and social structure, and includes barter economies and exclusive language. Each jail or prison will have a particular security level which determines the type of inmates that are housed within them. Typically, the seriousness of the offense of the inmates determines the security level of the facility, which in turn impacts the culture of the facility. One aspect of prison culture is the coercive environment. Shuford, 2018, examined the impact that the coercive environment has on stress for inmates and staff as well. Shuford's research identified 4 primary culture types that impact offender rehabilitation and emphasized how a shift in focus for staff to adopt positive interactions with inmates and be supportive of pro-social interactions can lead to better reentry results. Van Ginneken and Palman, 2023, conducted research in the Netherlands that examined the relationship between correctional facility regimes and culture and how they impact recidivism. They identified specific aspects of prison culture, such as autonomy and activities that were satisfying and meaningful to the inmates, as having an impact on the incarcerated individuals as they transitioned back to their communities following release. The theoretical perspective of this research is rooted in general strain theory. Individuals subjected to the pressures of incarceration, such as coercion from staff or peers, may respond to these pressures by engaging in violence or other negative coping mechanisms in order to adjust to their environment. The study design will be correlational, where we expect that positive staff and peer interactions will result in better reentry outcomes. The statistical analysis I will use will be the Pearson correlation coefficient. These study participants will be recruited through the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Reentry and Integration Division. In partnership with division staff, recruitment letters will be sent to reentrants via mail and email. The surveys will be distributed to participants via U.S. mail and email. They will be returned to the research staff by U.S. mail, email, telephonic interview, and in-person interview. The method of collection of the survey responses will be determined on a case-by-case basis. The survey responses will be combined to yield an institutional culture score of 1 through 4, with 1 being the worst institutional culture and 4 being the best. This slide shows the anticipated results of this study. We anticipate a loss of 9 participants through attrition. The data will show that of the 91 study participants, 37 recidivated and at least once during the 5 years following incarceration, and this population made up those who reported having very poor or poor staff and peer interactions. Data analysis will show that the participants who rated their staff and peer interactions as very poor or poor were reincarcerated, whereas those who rated their staff and peer interactions as good or excellent were not reincarcerated. This research will show that there is a direct correlation between positive staff and peer interactions and a reduction in recidivism. The current research examined the relationship between staff and peer interactions within correctional facilities and the reentrance recidivism rate after 5 years. More research to examine over time how the staff and peer interactions impact recidivism is needed. A longitudinal study of the ways in which correctional facility relationships impact inmates following their release from incarceration would benefit the body of research that already exists regarding recidivism. More in-depth research into additional aspects of incarceration affecting reentry outcomes is also needed, such as the availability of programming, social supports, and technology and facilities. Reducing recidivism and improving reentry outcomes can be accomplished by studying prison culture's impact on inmates following their release from incarceration. Staff and inmate relationships can have a profound effect on the well-being of incarcerated individuals, which will follow them as they reintegrate into their communities. The influences of institutional leadership, violence, and aggression among staff and inmates, peer influences, and staff attitudes cannot be overlooked. The Stanford Prison Experiment is a well-known example of how behavior is impacted by the prison experience. Research into prison culture can lead to improving recidivism rates by addressing the antisocial elements that have the greatest impact on incarcerated individuals and their return home.